An eyeball covered by a red no sign spins into view. White text on a black background reads, Mason in the dark. A blind man's journey through the wacky world of reading, writing, and other silly bollocks. Brought to you from beyond the black screen. Cut to black. Hello everyone. Mason here. How you doing? Next. Mason opens a door and steps into an apartment littered with empty beer bottles and piles of food. People are passed out on the floor and slumped on the furniture. He takes a step forward. Hello? Oh, you're not doing this again, are you? Hide from the blind man, yeah, it's really funny. Guys? Hello? The smiling face of an eager-looking stoner pops up from behind the sofa. Mason, bro, it's good to see you, man. How you doing, mate? Good, yeah, good, I'm good. What's going on? It smells like a student flat on Freshers Week in here. Party's over, bro. It's over. We blew through the green in like 2 hours. Everyone's wasted. I think I've had about 20 beers. This is the best party I've ever been to. The stoner stands, revealing he's naked. He strides over to the fridge and we get an unwelcome view of his extremely hairy backside. Do you want a beer? Yeah, sure. I think I'd just forgotten something. I'll just go get it. Mason turns and hurries back out through the still open door, completely forgetting about the flight of stairs leading up to the apartment. He tumbles. Ow. For God's sake, I'm always late to the party. I didn't watch Breaking Bad until a man in a paper shop gave me a 10-minute lecture on how awesome it was. By that time, the show had literally just finished a couple of days earlier. More or less the same thing happened with Peaky Blinders, and I didn't get into Bones until season 9. If something's cool and popular, I most likely won't get into it until everyone else has forgotten about it. That's just the kind of guy I am, and that's why I'm here in 2023, only just coming to the realisation that The Telltale Heart is great and Terry Pratchett's a funny guy. Oh, that's fantastic, Mason, well done. What's next? Jennifer Coolidge is funny. Well, actually, I did just start watching Two Broke Girls, and yeah, she's pretty bloody funny. Yeah, fine, you know, I get it. February was a busy month. I knuckled down and got plenty of writing done, but I'll talk to you about that in another video because this is a reading wrap up. I was scrolling through YouTube when a random video popped up. It was The Telltale Heart, narrated by Christopher Lee. And yeah, what am I supposed to say about that? It's Christopher Lee reading Edgar Allan Poe. It was awesome. Listening to the narrator, who's clearly off his rocker, explain that he's not mad because if he was, how could he possibly have killed this man in such a calm and creepy manner was, fun? I was gripped by the tension and the creeping comprehension that this guy is just nuts. It's short, snappy, and builds to a thrilling climax. By the end of it, I was like, wow, this Poe guy's pretty good, isn't he? Seriously though, I'm eternally jealous and ever so slightly bitter that some people were taught Poe in school whilst I was stuck with Willy Shakespeare. Look, do I know that Willy is probably awesome? Yeah, of course I do. You don't get that iconic without being, you know, good. Having said that, do I have the mental strength to decode his language and comprehend what he's actually saying? Do I? At the end of the day, Shakespeare and Poe are separated by like 200 years, and there's obviously going to be a massive shift in language during that time. Yeah, it might make me a bit of a Philistine, but Poe writes in a language that I can understand, and I know that edgy teenage Mason would have thought it was amazing. Okay, fine, it probably would have terrified me, but I would have still thought it was cool and memorable. I can't remember a single thing about what they taught me when it comes to Shakespeare. Honestly, I had a terrible habit of falling asleep in English lessons. The stupid thing is, they were my favourite lessons, but I still fell asleep. Bloody hell, I'm an idiot. Now I've got that out of my system, let's talk about what else I read. Coming in at number 3, it's Only You Can Save Mankind by Terry Pratchett, with a 3.7 average rating on Goodreads. Until February, I was labouring under the false impression that I'd never read Terry Pratchett before, but then I realised that something had been deleted by my terrible memory. A long time ago, I read the Johnny Maxwell trilogy, and that's written by Terry Pratchett. So, seeking a sweet hit of nostalgia, I went and listened to Only You Can Save Mankind. Unfortunately, now I'm realising that if I'd just waited a little bit longer, I could have read it for middle grade March. Bastard. I actually had a good time with it. Pratchett is good at, and seems to enjoy, taking average characters and throwing them into a wacky situation, which is an approach I can personally identify with. The thing is, how much you're going to get out of something like Only You Can Save Mankind depends on how much attention you're willing to pay. It's a silly story about a kid who has to save an alien race by entering a video game through his dreams, but there's all this stuff going on in the background. Johnny is actually a pretty tragic character. You've got the Gulf War going on in the background, which ties in thematically to Johnny's warped sense of reality. When real life suddenly looks like a video game, and video games look like real life, how can you tell what's real and what isn't? There's also the trying times, a phrase that Johnny uses repeatedly. It's clearly come from his parents, whose marriage is unfortunately falling apart. I felt a bit sorry for Johnny, to be honest. He's a nice lad and there's no two ways about it, his parents neglect him. They're almost entirely absent from the story, which works because kids live in a world of their own, but he's pretty much forced to look after himself, which actually does factor into the plot. Overall, Only You Can Save Mankind is a fun adventure with some substance to it. It's got emotional depth and some social commentary under the surface. A lot of the humour is derived from Johnny's understated reactions to these mad situations he finds himself in, which really endeared him to me. It could so easily have just been another silly story, but it's got an exploration of the nature of reality, what it means to be a person, and how the most average person can be a hero. I absolutely love that game space reflects Johnny's personality and even changes when Sigourney is introduced later on because she's more of a sci-fi horror fan. When Johnny's operating alone, the screwy spaceship is almost mundane. It's got nuts, bolts, and air vents, things that you can understand. The screwy themselves have an element of humanity to them. When Sigourney gets involved later on, the spaceship morphs into something dark and dangerous. The screwy become less human because she views aliens as monsters rather than people. Honestly, I think this would lend itself brilliantly to a limited series adaptation. With the found family dynamic, an interesting friendship group, tongue-in-cheek humour and, let's face it, retro nostalgia because the 90s is now 30 years ago, I can see this doing really well on Netflix. If you're looking for a fun, inventive and digestible middle grade read, I'd recommend Only You Can Save Mankind. I give it a solid thumbs up. Next up, at number 2, we've got The Girls I've Been, written and narrated by Tess Sharp with a 4.1 average rating. It seems a little bit unfair to call The Girls I've Been a young adult thriller, even though that's technically what it is. Nora O'Malley, alongside her friends Wes and Iris, enter a bank to deposit the money they earned in a fundraiser. Unfortunately, the bank is then robbed. What the bank robbers aren't expecting is for one of the hostages to be the daughter of a con artist. Nora might be the name she uses now, but she hasn't always been that girl. You see, she has a particular set of skills. The story follows Nora as she tries to figure out a way to resolve the situation by manipulating the bank robbers and getting her friends out alive. Each chapter is divided into a specific period of time during the robbery, the first hour, the second hour, so on and so forth. At the beginning of each chapter, Nora gives us a rundown of what her current plan and objectives are, as well as the assets at her disposal. These tend to change or get scrapped as she's forced to adapt to the unstable situation she finds herself in. We also get flashbacks that detail how Nora was raised by her morally corrupt mother who trained her to be a con artist. The lessons she learns in these flashbacks contextualise her actions in the present. In my opinion, what makes The Girls I've Been work is that Nora could easily have been this cool, calm, collected con artist that can easily outsmart the villains, and whilst she sort of is, she's also a tragic character who suffered a very difficult childhood. The whole con artist thing isn't glamorised at all, in fact it's the complete opposite. Tess Sharp takes great care to make sure that we know Nora grew up neglected, abused, manipulated and without love. She's nothing more than a pawn in her mum's games. Yeah, it's a heist, and the protagonist is a sarcastic teenager who gets to spout badass lines and manipulate the villains, but it's also a poignant exploration of childhood trauma. The entire point of the story, with its bisexual representation and found family trope, is that Nora is trying to come to terms with her trauma and figure out who she actually is, as well as what it means to love and be loved in a healthy way. It highlights how futile it is to run from your past, because no matter how hard you try, it will find you in the end. The bank robbery forces Nora to utilise the combined knowledge of all the people she's been to get the people she loves out of this situation, to use her trauma in a positive way. Tess Sharp manages to effectively convey a range of emotions and employs non-linear storytelling in an engaging way. It's got an addictive pace to it, and despite the less than cheerful subject matter, it's actually quite easy to read. I burned through it in 2 days. Even my main issue is my problem rather than the stories. Nora is only 17, so the romantic elements of this plot can sometimes feel overblown and melodramatic, but you have to bear in mind that Nora isn't your average teenager. At the end of the day, she wasn't given the childhood she deserves. She was forced to grow up too fast, and so the things she does, says and feels can seem out of sync with how old she is, but that's the point. I definitely don't think The Girls I've Been will be for everyone, and judging by the mixed reviews, it's not. But Tess Sharp does a solid job with the narration, and I enjoyed the fact it was something a bit different, so it gets a thumbs up and a recommendation from me. In first place, we've got Mort by Terry Pratchett with a 4.24 average rating on Goodreads. This was a buddy read alongside Jack from Spreadbook Joy, and the version we listened to was narrated by Sean Clifford with Peter Serafinowicz as the voice of Death. Mort is a coming-of-age story about a young lad who is, in the eyes of the people around him, simple, clumsy, and somewhat useless. Our introduction to him is through a conversation between his dad and his uncle, which gives us a quick and effective insight into who he is and how he's viewed. His dad takes him to a job market so he can find an apprenticeship, but Mort is sucked into an adventure when the personification of death comes riding along on a horse called Binky in a scene that is somehow badass and bonkers at the same time. Pratchett skillfully combines a serious, often beautiful writing style with a bizarre sense of humour. Mort is a well-told story with vivid characters, fantastic world building, and a setting that feels vibrant and alive. At the same time, it's a wacky, satirical adventure. As the story progresses, you get these comedic flares that build off a logical base before smashing your teeth in with a fistful of ridiculous. One of the many ways he does this is by utilising what I'll call the normal silly technique, in which he employs a metaphor where a person or a place is something, something, or something. The first two are completely normal, but the third is unexpected, hilarious, and often absurdly silly. However, with elements like a sack of drowned cats, sex workers soliciting Mort, and the various insights we get into the seedy underbelly of Ankh-Morpork, that wacky humour can sometimes mask some dark material. It hits all the traditional beats of the hero's journey and incorporates the tried and tested tropes of the fantasy genre in a charming way. It makes fun of it and pays homage to it in equal measure. There's wizards and princesses, magic and romance, but it's never quite delivered the way you expect. It's engaging to follow Pratchett as he moves around the disc, zooming in and out and allowing us to experience a range of perspectives from small and mundane to epic and metaphysical. Just like he did with Johnny in Only You Can Save Mankind, Pratchett contrasts an understated, down-to-earth protagonist with the flamboyant, wacky world around them. It's a super effective technique that draws the audience in by anchoring us to the protagonist. We find the world as weird as they do. Mort starts the story as a fish out of water who's bewildered by the scenario he finds himself in, but Pratchett crafts an entertaining, engaging arc with so much character development crammed in that by the end, you believe Mort might turn out a hero and you want him to win. Death is a character with so much depth. He's experiencing an existential crisis. He's trying to understand the human condition and what the point of life is. There's some brilliant scenes where he's just off on his own and they're simultaneously hilarious and intriguing. We get to follow him as he goes around trying new things, such as drinking, dancing, gambling and fishing. It's fascinating to see the way he perceives and interacts with the world and vice versa. I just love that Pratchett takes a concept like death, turns it on its head, personifies it and creates a character that is likeable and relatable. Yeah, Death is a skeleton, robed in black with a sight and eyes that convey an endless abyss. But he also loves cats, gets lonely, and delivers lines like, "I could murder a curry." However, it's not flawless. Some of the comedic tangents can feel meandering and crammed in unnecessarily, especially in the first half of the story. For the most part, the pacing is well executed, but the ending is sudden and quite jarring. As far as the audiobook goes, Peter Serafinowicz is amazing as Death, and Sean Clifford puts in a superb performance, utilising a range of voices and accents that are solid, believable, and only very occasionally slightly over the top. On the other hand, the footnotes are lacklustre at best, and since they're accompanied by a sound effect before and after, they seriously disrupt the immersion of the story. It's a massive shame because Bill Nighy, who narrates the footnotes, is obviously amazing and we all know that. The bastard makes me cry every single time I watch Vincent and the Doctor. Literally happened to me a couple of weeks ago. But his performance here is so lifeless and it's a shameful waste of his talent. In the end, the good heavily outweighs the bad and those little issues aren't enough to affect my overall enjoyment of the story. I adore Pratchett's writing style and I've got no doubt that I'll read more Discworld now. Mort gets a painfully extended thumbs up and a solid recommendation from me. Hello Tigger. Getting involved, are you? What do you think of Discworld? Nothing, fine. So, there you have it. That was February, and everything that I read was much better than January, so when it comes to the rankings, these just slot in on top. My question of the day is this. What is the funniest story you've experienced in any medium? Have you enjoyed this video? If so, the like and subscribe buttons are just sitting there, waiting to be pressed. Now press them, or I'll open the trapdoor beneath your feet and you'll tumble into a pit of angry, ravenous vipers. If you've got thoughts to share, or you want to say hi, then you know where the comment section is, and you can find the links to all my social media in the description. Thanks ever so much for spending time with me today, guys. Until next time, take care. For now I'm off, and you should have a good one.